Greetings. This is David Fortier, and we have another TBE live stream report. Actually, this is the beginning of a new series of conversations we're going to be having with Bristol Public School Superintendent Iris White. And we are naming this little adventure of ours Superintendent Time. So, welcome, Superintendent White.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
It's great to take some time from your schedule. I know you're busy. You're in the middle of budget time.
Yes.
So it's, you've got lots going on.
Yes.
So, and what the idea behind this conversation is to give people in the public an idea who you are, and also to talk about some things that are some significance in the school system that are going on now, or even fun things that are going on in the school system. But what we're looking at is 10 minutes for you to talk about and bring up any issues that you'd like to, any awards, any kind of activities or things people should be aware of in the public. 10 minutes for me to ask some questions about things like the budget, which will come up for sure. And then 10 minutes for our viewers to send in questions. They can do that on our actual live streams, and they could actually do that in the chat, I guess the chat area of our live streams. And they could also send it to our email, and I'll be checking in the email on that. This is a little bit of an experiment tonight too, because we're holding our microphones, and I'm used to having the microphone be held for me. So I'm going to navigate and negotiate my clipboard and my pen and the conversation. So welcome. It looks like we have some sunshine out there today.
Yes.
So I hope you're feeling a little bit better. But last night was a big night with the board, and the finance board specifically. But what is it that you might want people to know about that's happening in our schools now, maybe over the last month or so, that maybe isn't directly related to the budget just yet?
Of course. So thank you so much to the Bristol edition. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to engage more with the community. I realized that when I was appointed the acting superintendent in May 2024, folks really didn't know who I was. And so it's been a learning experience both ways, learning more about Bristol and also opportunities for folks to learn more about me and my vision for how I want to lead the school system. So, and I want to thank the Bristol edition as well. I know that you have reporters at our board meetings faithfully attending and providing the summary articles after. I think it's very important. All of our meetings are recorded and people can tune in live, but everyone has busy lives and a lot going on. So really appreciate the fact that they have the opportunity to read your articles to understand what's happening at the meetings.
There's a big thank you to be recognized, first of all, that we are there and we're doing this good work. And then also to let people know that they can read reports about what's going on, what the big items are.
Yes.
And that's terrific. So thank you very much.
Yes, I want to acknowledge you, and I also want to acknowledge the Bristol Press.
Yeah.
I don't think it's called the Bristol Press anymore, but the Bristol Herald. I'm trying to get used to that new terminology. But Brian Johnson has faithfully read all of my superintendent weekly updates that I post every Sunday on Parent Square. And even if you're not signed up for Parent Square, you can also find those updates on our Bristol Public Schools website on the homepage.
We're going to have to do that because we have to keep up with the Herald Press.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
We're trying to stay a step ahead.
Some friendly competition. So I wanted to acknowledge that one of my goals this year, priorities as superintendent, is open up more communication channels. That came loud and clear actually during the superintendent search when there was a survey of what people really were interested in wanting. And transparency and communication came up as two main priorities. And so the board agrees with that. And so we're also working with the board leadership on ways that they can also provide more communication about decisions that were made during board meetings, policies that were passed, and how can they have the platform to be able to share their thought as to why the decisions were made and what are the implications for the community. So we're working on that as well.
I think that's terrific.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a very healthy attitude to have, because especially in this day and age, it's difficult with social media because it seems that the response is not an appreciative one. But it's And it's something I want to bring up in your approach to the budget when we get to the budget.
Hmm.
But I think so that's one of your goals, and this is one of the marks
Absolutely.
of an Irish white superintendency.
Yes.
Yes, so that's
Yes.
it. And I think sometimes people get a little bit maybe confused because people are busy, and I understand that.
Yes.
And sometimes government and the way things work is a little bit it's not something they attend to on a daily basis.
Right.
There are ways to do things. Even
Yes.
running a meeting, you use Robert's rules, and
Correct.
that's not you don't do that at your dinner table necessarily.
Right.
There's
Right.
different rules at your dinner
Absolutely.
table. But so how does the superintendent and the board of education now? What would you say to explain the differences? They it's not like they don't work for you. You do work for them.
Yes, I do. I absolutely do. One of the major responsibilities of the Board of Education is hiring the superintendent and evaluating the superintendent. Two major important roles.
And yet, as with any kind of a hire anywhere, I mean, you have your duties and responsibilities.
Yes.
And that's separate from what the board does. So how would you define yours duties and responsibilities as opposed to those of the board?
So I really have the responsibility as the CEO of the day-to-day operations of the school system. And so the Board of Education really sets the vision, approves my goals and priorities for the school year, and also is responsible for setting policy.
Okay, so give me an example of a policy.
So a policy that was actually passed last year was the policy around the use of the wands in school, security wands, handheld metal detectors.
Okay, that's good because I'm
Yes.
thinking, is that for kids? Is that for adults? And it's like, yeah. So it's
Yes.
so these are handheld, they're metal detectors. Okay, right.
Absolutely. And so the administrators at both high schools were very, very smart and very open because we had purchased the devices, but they said it really should go to the board. There should be a conversation, a community conversation. It should be an open conversation about why we want to use these and the public to have an opportunity to provide feedback. And so that process took a couple of months, but it was a really good discussion amongst the board members because with policy, there's always changes that have to be made, and it's a lot of work to upgrade policies and revise them when new laws are passed, et cetera. And so we saw some language that was older language in terms of searches and what the policy said. So that really was aligned to passing of this policy regarding the handheld wands. So that's one example. And another more recent example was the passing of the policy regarding armed security officers.
Yes.
And that was another topic that we wanted to make sure that the public was aware that the board was taking up this policy, and we wanted to make sure that the public knew that they could come and provide public comment. They could come verbally to provide that topic, that comment, or they could also send it in. So we allowed enough time through the policy subcommittee and then to the full board. So those are just two examples.
And that's the purview of the board.
Yes, that is the
policy, right?
purview
And then
of the
it's for
board.
yours is to execute that in the schools and come up with a workable routine
Absolutely.
that respects what they had to say, and also, I mean, your interest too. I mean, you want to save school.
Absolutely. And it's also our responsibility to make sure that notice goes out regarding these meetings and what the topics are, and that folks have the opportunity to provide comment.
And again, it's a healthy thing to have comment.
Yes.
Because you want to make an informed decision.
Right.
And yet, depending on the gravity of the situation, people are going to be invested and they're going to be bring an emotional kind of element to that kind of thing. But essentially, it is it's good to have the discourse. It's good to have the conversation.
Yes, it is.
To find out where people come from. So when you make a decision, you're taking those things into consideration, which does not necessarily mean that you are going to take everyone's opinion into account.
Correct.
But you have to, as a professional, determine that this is the routine you want to do, and then you can, having listened to the comments and form that decision, you can actually make a rational you can give them a rationale for why you did what you did, which is kind of what educators are supposed to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the board also wants that opportunity
Yeah.
to provide
Yeah.
to the public the rationale for why decisions were made.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's great. And I will say too, students do have rights in schools.
absolutely.
All right.
Yes, they
Sometimes
do.
people forget that.
Hmm.
Yes, and so we have to have. And as a person who was a journalism facilitator, a newspaper in a school, sometimes those lines get a little bit blurred.
Hmm.
And sometimes if people aren't aware of or knowledgeable, they're going to do something out of what they think is a sound initiative, but essentially it's not in the spirit of the law.
Right. Hmm.
All right.
Yes.
So that said, I mean, I can talk about those kinds of things all the time. I think it's
Mhm.
terrific. But I did want to talk a little bit about the budget, and I wanted
Yes.
to talk about the budget and give you plenty of opportunity to address what it is you would like to say about the budget. But
Mhm.
one of the things that struck me about this particular budget, and in keeping what you just talked about, is the idea of transparency.
Yes.
You are presenting the budget, and in a way that's saying this is what, if you're going to be honest, we need to run our school system.
Yes.
Whereas in the past, it may have been people have tried to hedge that a little bit so that when you got to
Yes.
the finance board, people weren't aware fully of what was happening.
Yes.
So the budget you have right now is kind of like this is your part of your conversation right now. Now
Yes.
there's another conversation.
Hmm.
And then, of course, it looks like an overall 11% increase over last year, which people just freak out when they see numbers.
Yes, they
And
do.
when it
I
comes to
understand.
dollars, they
Mhm.
just, they kind of lose it. And I understand if it's affecting their livelihood or something
Yes.
like that, it makes a difference. So I respect that. But so you're doing this. So tell me a little bit about your thinking and this approach.
Hmm. Thank you for the opportunity. So during my first budget cycle last year, the approach I took as a new superintendent was to say, this is similar to what you just said. This is the amount that it will take to run a school system of this size. These many schools, this much staff, these many students. This is what it takes to run the school system. And the reason why we know how much it takes to run the school system is because during the beginning of the budget process, school administrators will submit their requests for funding. Department heads, central office department heads, will submit what it costs to run the school system. We have unfunded mandates from the state that need to be addressed.
I think
So
which
that
everyone
helps
is
us.
aware of.
Everyone is aware of. It's an ongoing concern.
ongoing concern,
Absolutely. We have collective bargaining agreements. We have what called fixed costs
Mhm.
that we have to abide by legally. There's special education law. There is a lot, but it's very important in transparency. This is the amount that it costs to run the school system. And before making any cuts, we want to give the full amount
Mhm.
and have that full transparency. Don't want to make cuts in isolation, because I could sit here in my office with my central office team and we could have tried to make cuts before we presented it to the board
Mhm.
of education. But that's not fair to the board of education. It's not fair to the public because they don't have an understanding of what everything costs. And if we make cuts, why were these cuts made? What was the philosophy behind these cuts? Why did this school get cut more than another school? Why did arts get cut more than this sports? Where are the priorities? It can become very sticky, controversial.
It just seems to me this
situation.
is more of a grown up way to do it,
Yes.
and not just grown up for for the board to do this or the Bristol Public Schools to do this or you to do this, but for the finance board to know what they're actually dealing with, and
Right.
what people in the community and the residents who support the schools should
Absolutely.
and if you're trying to fudge it or making it seem it's not what it is, it seems to me that you're not being respectful. So anyway,
Correct.
that's my little comment on that. I
Yes,
think
no, I
it's a very
appreciate that. It's very
respectful way
true.
to go about it. Yes.
Thank you. And interestingly, last year, the city, on a cycle, on fairness to them, on a cycle, they said that departments go through an auditing process. And so last year they hired CLA to do an audit, an outside audit. And what the auditors found was, among other things, the big issue was underfunding of special education, and the costs, the amounts that were put into the budgets did not match the previous year's expenditures,
Mhm.
which is a major accounting
So
not good thing to do.
you're kind of, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
If you're not funding and you know costs are going to be more
Yes.
and you don't address that, there's going to be, let's say, at the end of that is not going to be a good result. And last
Yes.
year was not a very good result because
Right.
of the notoriety of what happened. And maybe you can explain that in your own terms.
Yes. So actually, after I was appointed in May 2024, there was a surprise. The city said that they did not realize the deficit. The deficit was ended up being larger than what the city had anticipated or what the city had been told previously.
Mhm.
And so we wanted to avoid that. What we're trying to do is be open and transparent,
Mhm.
look at what structural changes we can make. And so we're not in this situation year after year where there are deficits, large deficits, and where I have to come in at a high request because we're still trying to make up for the underfunding that
Mhm.
took place in the past. Because as superintendent, I feel it's not just my responsibility to look at year to year budget. I'm trying to forecast years out, right? So that we don't make the same mistakes. And so the city and the school district are in a better position financially.
Mhm. And
That's
again,
the goal.
and so incrementally, you're going to see things come more into sync.
Yes.
Yes. And I don't think, and I think for residents and citizens, I think, who are, paying taxes, I mean, there's going to be an issue with taxes.
Yes.
Yes. How large or small that is, that depends on the rest of the process this year. But essentially, I mean, there are always going to be costs associated with education.
Yes.
But there's also an initiative in the state to try to address this special education funding. And that is kind of interesting because of the way we rely on property taxes. And so I don't know how far they will go with that, but they do have some funds to kind of address that. And do you know where that stands right now, and how they're working that out? Because they're in the middle of their short session.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes. So there's a big focus on education cost sharing. And this is an issue across the state, as I'm sure folks are aware of. We read the newspaper and we see the headlines from other cities larger than ours, the huge deficits that they have, and trying to figure out how they're going to resolve it. But there is a lot of activity at the legislature around, in particular, one Senate bill that would increase the education cost share grant amounts to districts. Currently, we are an alliance district. This is just an example of ECS. We are an alliance district, and we receive a carve out of the ECS funding. The district submits an application to the State Department of Education on how to use those funds, which are really supposed to be used to improve student outcomes, to improve
In the
academic.
special education
Yes.
area.
Yes, and overall. And so it's going to be flat funded next year,
Oh.
which of course affects the general budget because we have a number of positions in the Alliance District grant. And there were also some positions, new positions that we wanted to put into Alliance. And now that it's flat funded, those new position asks have to go back into the general budget.
So the alliance itself, how would you define the alliance for people who are listening and who are not familiar with educational parlance?
So years ago, when Governor Malloy had a commissioner named Stephen Pryor, and he came in with the idea of doing education reform, and there was a great deal of legislation regarding that. And a piece of that legislation in 2012 was around alliance districts, which at that point were the 30 lowest performing districts in the state, based on a performance index that the State Department of Education uses, looking at chronic absenteeism data, academic data, etc. And Bristol has been an alliance district from the beginning, and we receive funds, a set side of funds that are supposed to be used to improve outcomes for students, with the goal eventually achieving enough that we would no longer be an alliance district. We would no longer be a
And
lower
then
performing district.
then you'd have to absorb that, the funding for those programs.
Yes, so it's
Yeah,
very tricky. So
yeah.
sort of to your point, it's sort of, well,
Mm.
if you do well enough to no longer be alliance district, we no longer get that carve out
Right,
of
like
funding.
it's yay, we made
Yes,
that, right?
yes.
But
We
yes,
no longer receive that carve out of
how much
funding.
is the alliance funding right now?
I don't have the
You don't have to be
official amount.
exact, but just
It's
maybe
about 12, 13 million.
$13 million. Yeah.
Yes,
Right. So again, that's a big chunk of change.
that is.
Yeah.
That is.
All right. So that's something for people to kind of look at. And so in your planning, I imagine that you're anticipating at that some point the next step. If Bristol, when Bristol, or do you see Bristol, moving out of that category of an alliance school?
It really would depend on if they decide to limit the amount of alliance districts. There was some legislation last year that was talking about reducing the number of alliance districts from 30 to 15. If that had happened, Bristol would no longer have been an alliance district.
Yeah. Well, that's something to keep in mind. Yeah. So with this particular budget, what is it you are particularly you would like people to understand, aside from your approach? What else is there that you would look for as a successful outcome for Bristol Public Schools and for the city?
Successful outcome would be we would be able to prioritize making sure that we are supporting our learners, particularly in the early grades, because we talk a lot about early prevention, the importance of students being able to read by the time they enter third grade or finish third grade. And so we're seeing a lot more greater need in the early years, particular in kindergarten, noticeably this year. And we think it's effective partially of COVID. Also, a lot of our students are coming in who have not had a structured educational experience before, social experience. And so there's a lot of work, a lot of support that needs to be implemented in the schools for social emotional support for those students.
And the schools, I imagine, feel a lot of pressure. You have to be able to deal with all
There's
those
a
kinds of
great
things.
a great deal of pressure. So, and I know that this was a priority for the board last year when we unfortunately had to make some cuts. We wanted to try to avoid eliminating positions that had direct constant contact with students and trying to make sure the class sizes were not too large.
Yeah, class sizes are huge. I'm a former educator. I always will be an educator. I mean, regardless. And so I understand class sizes do make a difference.
Yes.
We did get a question, and if I have the question correct, it has to do, are there plans to overhaul special ed and separate the kids with ADHD and autism into separate programs?
So there, for those folks who may have watched the presentation last night to our Board of Finance, what we are trying to do is look at special education. Even before I started as superintendent, there was talk about how do we contain the cost for out of district placements, because there's such a variance of how much they can charge.
Give people an idea of the range of costs that are associated with out of district placements.
It can go as high between $100,000 up to $300,000.
And this is for a student.
For one student.
For one student. So people think, oh, maybe that's not much when you're looking at a bunch of, but that's for one student.
And that doesn't necessarily include transportation as well. So you include transportation on top of that. So we have a couple of new students who may have come in from a different district. Their IEP says they have this. We have to provide it. It can really have a huge negative impact on the budget.
On the budget, yeah.
On the budget. And so our plan is, if we can hire some more special education teachers and paraeducators, we would have the capacity to open additional programs in district. So we'd be able to serve our students that we have currently
Mm-hmm.
and not have to outplace them. But I know our director of pupil personnel services has also said that she's getting calls from other districts that would like to send, if we had room in our programs, which we currently don't, their students to our programs because we would charge less money. We know their quality, they know their quality programs, their students would have a good learning experience. So we need additional staff in order to open up those additional programs.
And so if you did get the additional staff, if we did, because this is our
yes,
our public schools, if you did get that, would that situation cover the costs of those new staff?
yes.
So that was, so there's, yes.
So there is
taking
that
a risk,
we're taking a risk.
and then, but you're thinking that this would be something that in the end would not just help with the situation in Bristol, but it also might help the situation in school systems around here, or who would send kids
Absolutely.
here. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's it's difficult for me to think of our public schools as our revenue sources.
Yes,
but
you
it's a
don't really want to
reality.
think that
I
way,
guess,
but
yeah,
that
yeah,
would be
yeah.
that absolutely
Yeah,
would be
that would be
a
something.
revenue source. So that's
Yeah.
part of what we're talking about. It's not just the current budget, but we're looking ahead years down the line as to how we can make those structural changes.
Mhm. Yeah, and so I think our time is kind of, we're wrapping up. And so if there's anything
wow,
you
that
would
went
like
fast.
to say to our audience, or if anything
Mhm.
you'd like to add or have people look out for.
Mhm.
I know you mentioned that there's we've got a couple of good news stories in our schools as far as
Yes.
some things that are happening. I would defer to you, so
Yes, thank you.
you can talk about that. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the next regular board meeting is next Wednesday, April 1st, at 7:00 p.m. And at every regular Board of Ed meeting, it starts with staff and student recognition. And we're going to have a lot of recognition this month. We have a student, a Bristol Eastern High School student, Jean Zendel, who was one of the winners, high school winners of the Chris Murphy, Dr. King essay. I had the honor of being at the breakfast award ceremony with her and her family and administration this past Saturday morning. So we'll be honoring her. We'll also be honoring, of course, the Bristol Central women's Rams team that won the state championship on Saturday.
Yeah,
Yes, very exciting. I was at the game Saturday afternoon. Great showing from Bristol. So thank you everybody who drove down to Mohegan Sun to root our team on. So that was very exciting. So we're looking forward to honoring them as well. And also next week, I know this is of interest to a lot of people. The board will be voting on the last day of school for this school year, and as well as the high school graduation date, because we had quite a winter this winter.
Did.
So yes, we will be doing that as well.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you again for having us on.
And we have a comment. My kids flourishing in Bristol Public Schools. Shout out to Principal Farrell and Stafford.
That's tremendous.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Great to see.
Yes.
A lot of good things happening across our district.
All right. So thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
I'm already looking forward to our next conversation.
I am as well.
I'm sure we'll get some feedback from people about some issues they would like to hear about next time.
Yes.
But in the meantime, you be well, and
do the same.
and enjoy working on the budget as much as you can.
Thank you very
much.
much.
Focus for that. So I hope you're getting some sleep.
Yes, I am. Thank you, David.
This is Dave Fortier with Bristol Edition's Superintendent Time signing off.
Thank you.